So you've played Commander, but have you ever played Commander with a wheel that gives you brutal setbacks and strict deck building decisions? Well, I've created the wheel of, well, I actually never came up with a name. It says Whirl of Fun, but I think it's kind of the opposite of that. It gives me strict sort of setbacks. So how about you come up with a name for this wheel in the comments down below? Either way, this wheel is going to be my accomplice in deck building moving forward today before we get into the gameplay portion of this video. This wheel has different setbacks, punishments, and also restrictions that I must follow when building my next Commander deck. What's more, once I finally build the deck, I'll be pitted against my friends who will be playing some of their best lists. It's an uphill battle where every single loss means that I spin the wheel again, incurring incremental disadvantage as the games go on. I asked and my playgroup answered, if I lose today, I have to do a 6-hour deck audit live stream for free. That means you, the viewer, get to submit your decks for free and I will audit them to your preference. This is masochism at its finest, so let's go ahead and see what the wheel gods have in store for me. No, not you. Stop. Go away. Let's see what they have in store. But before I spin the wheel, I need to actually select my commander. And I think that the best way to do that in the spirit of our randomness with the wheel is actually select a commander at random. And here, as you can see, I have a card, actually have about 50 of them, that are individual commanders. And we're going to select one here at random today. I don't have anything marked, nothing. These are all just random commanders that I picked out of various sets that I've wanted to play. And there's a lot of incredible hits in here. But for every incredible hit, there is a terrible commander. It's about 50-50. So I could either get something really great or just awful. So let's just select one out of this at random and see where we go. I think we're just going to go with, as this is not scripted here, I guess we'll go with this one right on top here, okay? I am not a magician in any sense. This is completely random. I have no idea what I'm going to get here. So what did I get? Oh, okay. This is one. Oh boy, this may not be the best one. This is Arcades the Sabbath. That's how you know I didn't stack this. I could have got something really great out of here. So this is a legendary Elder Dragon. It is, oh my god, 8 mana in Bant, and it is a 7/7 flyer. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Arcades Sabbath unless you play Bant colors. Each untapped creature you control gets +0/+2 as long as it's not attacking. And you can pay white as an activated ability to give Arcades Sabbath +1/+0 until end of turn. All right. I mean, it kind of sucks. I'm not going to lie. This one's going to be difficult. This one's going to be really difficult for me to win. I think a 6-hour live stream might be coming soon to you, but maybe I'm going to surprise myself. Maybe there's some hidden text here that I don't know about. So in order to establish my deck building guidelines, I need to spin the wheel. So we're going to do this 3 separate times to give myself 3 individual sort of setbacks or hindrances for me when building the deck. And then we're going to battle against my friends. So let's see what I get. Okay, so this is actually one I was really excited about. And you can see I did that all in one take. This wasn't like, you know, I cut anything out of here. I'm actually really excited. So I can only go to the store and buy my cards. There's this local store near me where they sell penny, 10-cent, 25-cent cards, and then I'm going to purchase from them in order to actually build my deck. So I don't get to use my collection. I don't get to use anything specific that I order from online, nothing. It just has to come from that store. So you guys are going to come along with me today in a special episode to actually get those cards. But let's see what I get next. Well, this is now X'd off, so just consider this one invalid if I land on it again. Oh boy. All right, now it's the time we get to talk about budget. I don't think budget's going to really matter for this one too much, luckily. But the budget of the deck is reduced by 25%. So I was going to go with around a $400 to $500 budget for this series. We're just going to see kind of where it lands because it's the very first video. But we're going to reduce that by 25%. So instead of $400, we are down to about $300 now for the total budget of the deck. So keep that in mind moving forward. And let's see what our very last disadvantage or encumbrance is going to be for building our deck. This actually really sucks. No board wipes. All right, that is not ideal. This seems like a very controlling deck. Like I'm just going to get the board controlled and then, I don't know, go from there. But I don't know where I'm going to go with this. I think that without any board wipes in the deck, it's going to be very hard for me to control the pace of the game. And with that in mind, This is an expensive commander. I'm going to need multiple different ramp sources. Luckily, we're in green, and I know that last time I was there a few weeks ago, they had some green ramp sources, so at least I can grab those, which will make me feel a little bit better. But it's going to be a really hard ask. So R3 that we actually rolled for today is reduced budget by 25%. We are capped at $300. I don't think that's going to be a problem anyway. And then we also have no board wipes. And then finally, I have to go to my local game store and shop for the cards. So now that those restrictions are in place, I think that I just have to get to deck building. So I'm going to bring you guys along with me to the store, and we're going to go do some deck building. Let's go do it. All right, guys, we just got to the game store. So we're about to head inside, and I just want to do a few bookkeeping items first. So this store I have been to many times before. This isn't just like a one-off thing of me going to this place. I also asked for permission to film before I went in. I called them ahead and I gave them advance notice. So everything hopefully is in line on that front. But let's see what they have, because I genuinely don't know if they're gonna have anything that is going to really be strong enough to compete with my friends, but we'll see if we can find something today. So let's get in there and find some cards. Hey guys. Thank you for accommodating me today.
Oh, yes,
appreciate it.
No sweat.
Oh, you getting it all laid out for me already?
Oh yeah. Shoot, I'm getting the pricing out cards right now. But where did you want to start for looking at cards?
Let's maybe start with the binder, and then we'll work our way up from there. Yeah. Also, I'm just gonna keep this down. I'm not gonna like get your face on camera or anything like that. Mostly, so it's gonna be a little brutal. This is this is the brutal in the sense that this is the commander that I got, so I brought it with me because I'm mostly looking for those colors, like the Bant colors.
Yeah.
And man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull off a win with it, but.
Yeah, things could have gone way different.
We'll have to work that into.
Hey, listen, it's all right. I'm looking for just like as much consistency as I can get, you know, like ramp pieces and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you're just putting up the big wall.
Yeah, essentially.
But he's 7.
Yep.
Does he have trample?
No, not this one.
He's flying.
Good.
But yeah, trample would not be.
I think the cool part about this is like, I'm gonna be using cards that like normally just would never be used, right, for this type of thing, because you guys don't have like every card under the sun, you know. So like I'm gonna have to make some concessions. So actually, this card might be good. Actually,
we've been stocking up on quarters. Oh, on all of them, we've been hitting all of them.
It's a nice foil too.
No, it is a different kind of stock than you've seen in a while.
Good.
I mean, I don't know when the last time was that you looked.
Like I said, I'm grabbing some stuff that's like just even like good stuff, you know. It's like if I can just fit it in and it's good enough to make it into the deck, I might have to just do that. So
cards got added. I feel like it's probably been about 800.
I can imagine. How many people do you have coming in now to like actually look through the MTG stuff?
Not really.
A bunch want to come more.
Oh my god, you guys have like one of like the best cards for this commander. That's so wild. Yeah. That's so crazy.
Oh my god.
It's price too. Yeah, it's so good.
This guy is that stack.
So that card.
Both.
No, it wouldn't stack.
It says and.
But it's so good. It's so good.
Yes, it's still count. No, it's just counting.
It's so good. Yeah.
What was that? Where did that come from?
$199.
$199.
Yep, $199.
Yes, sir.
Oh yeah, like that with the Xbox. Yeah.
This might be good too. Topiary Stompers, great.
I haven't used that one yet. Like normally the.
Do I buy the French card? Farseek, yes.
Oh, dude, him with that card. He taught me everything I know about Magic. So he would get the best.
Have you guys know? I don't like white border stuff, but I'm gonna have to do it because.
Mechanically, dude, who cares?
Well, right. You know, I know.
They just leave it.
Leave it. Yeah, but it still looks hideous in your hand. But if mechanically it's sound and you're looking forward to it, you see it quicker.
This is true. Choose an instant card you own from outside the game. That seems like a forbidden tech in this challenge. Okay.
What is it doing?
So literally, you play this, and then you get to just pick an instant that you own in your collection, and then just like add it to your hand.
Like you go get it.
Yeah.
Like you've got it on standby.
Yeah. I might have to get this. That might save my ass.
Is it an un?
All right, this is Editing Kyle, here to just give you sort of a breakdown because we had over 2.5 hours of footage at this store. I sorted through about 15,000 cards, and that's just way too much to include in one video. And for our purposes, I'm going to hit on some highlights and also talk to you about some difficulties that I had with this deck. So some of the absolute all-stars that I pulled, you saw them in the binder: Kogla, the Titan Ape. We have Hallbreaker Horror and Welcoming Vampire. All have different merits. They all sort of do different things and don't necessarily synergize with each other, but we need some good stuff for this commander. It's just pretty awful by itself. And in fact, I don't even know if really swinging with it is a viable strategy to begin with, because just to let him or this commander exist for one turn, it's 11 total mana, 8 upfront costs, and then 3 on the upkeep. So I felt like that just wasn't consistent enough. And as I was sorting through the box, I actually came across a few different themes, one of which was Blink, because we have Azorius colors. And I actually started setting aside a totally separate pile just for Blink alone. And I built up maybe like 20 or 30 cards to fit that Blink theme, but I didn't think that the cards were good enough. Yes, I could have had a solid Blink package, but my Enter the Battlefield effects were really sort of lackluster. There wasn't really anything abusable. There were no infinite combos that I was able to find sorting through all of their cards. So I went with more of a good stuff route, and I also went with more of a control heavy path with cards like Manglehorn. I went for as many counterspells as I could gather. One such one, which you'll see come up in a episode in this video, is Plasma Capture, which is just basically a worse mana drain. But that card I felt was also very on theme with our commander, just sort of like a heavier hitting, more battle cruisery style of card. And I also went for as many cantrips as I could get, such as Shielding Plaques and Growth Spiral and Unbridled Growth. And unfortunately, the wall theme that Arcades tends to build around sort of fell to the wayside. I did still have some walls in there, such as Wall of Runes, but by and large, I didn't think I had any realistic way to close the game out if I was just including walls. I was basically just going to be cantripping into hitting my walls, into getting my counterspells, just to, I don't know, have my commander out, which is already way too expensive. It just didn't seem like a good enough plan to me. So I ended up including some just heavier hitting cards, like just bigger bodied, green creatures, for instance, just to sort of fill out the deck itself. And that was really it. There wasn't too much else to it. So unfortunately, I didn't find anything that really fit the theme very well, but in between games, I do have a chance to spin the wheel, which has a 50% chance to also give me some bonus money that I can put into the deck for my own collection. So I'm just fingers crossed, hoping I can land that, maybe if I lose the first game. So let's get to it. Let's introduce the players and see who we're going to be playing against today.
Kind of funny that everyone's like, you know what I mean? They go down to like the story, right?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Tim. I'm playing Aloro, and I'm here to kill Kyle.
Tim, you're playing Aloro, and clearly you're playing more of like I'm guessing like a Pillow Fort style. What is your plan with this deck?
Oh no, 100% Pillow Fort. My whole plan is to simply just stay away from everybody, build myself a little wall of protection, and hopefully nobody messes with me until I can pull off some kind of weird infinite combo win in this deck, which is going to be almost impossible.
Gotcha. So you don't know what I'm playing yet, and I actually brought the card. I want to show you what I'm playing. You're
Fantastic.
Probably going to think it's fucking ridiculous.
Let's see what we got here. Arcades. Okay. Yep. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Arcades. Sabbath unless you pay. Each untapped creature you control gets +0/+2 as long as it is not attacking. Wow. Have fun.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, you're gonna lose.
How do you think you're going to do?
Well, realistically, my deck doesn't really do a lot of like swinging at anybody. So I feel like if I can just protect myself long enough, I think I'll do okay. But it depends on what else everyone else is playing. If they're going to be swinging at me or doing infinite ping damage, I'm going to be in trouble.
What power level would you say your deck is?
Oh, definitely a 6. I built this deck last night. Most of the cards are proxied. And there is 2 ways to win in this deck. Either I win with infinite life gain and damage dealt, or I approach the second sun.
Gotcha. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I can't wait for you to kill me.
It's going to be great.
Hello, my name is Mark. I've been on the channel before. I'm playing Will Health, and I'm here to kill Kyle. No, I don't like that. I fucked it up. Take two. Wow, why is this so hard today? Hi, my name is Mark. I've been on the channel before. You might remember me. I'm playing Will Health, and I'm here to kill Kyle.
All right, Mark. So Wilhel is a precon commander. Did you upgrade this, or is this just a strict precon?
No, I upgraded the hell out of this deck. It's got a good amount of dual lands. Nothing crazy over the top. You know, your basic shocks and a couple fetches. There are infinite combos. That's the way I win. Pinging everyone for infinite damage, infinite zombie tokens. But yeah, it's Will Health combos.
What would you say the power level roughly is for this deck?
Well, it's not consistent enough, so I would give it probably a 7.25. Solid. But yeah, it's not consistent. So if it had more consistency, I'd bring it up a level. But
Your rating is higher than Tim rated his deck. How do you feel about that?
oh, I'm ready to win. I'm ready to spin this wheel. I hope you're ready. I hope you're ready to lose.
Well, you sort of know who my commander is, but I'm gonna show you. So that's my commander. It's in Bance. One of your favorite color combos.
Oh, I love Mant. Okay. Oh, I'm looking forward to this. Spin away.
Is it true that you hold me at gunpoint to film certain videos? Because some viewers believe that, in certain videos you're making me apologize to you. Is that true?
I think I have Kyle wrapped around my finger enough that I don't need to hold him at gunpoint. He just knows the right thing to do. Hi, I'm Allie, and today I will be playing Lathril, my elf tribal deck. Lathril was the first deck that I really ever played, that Kyle built me, and I got into Magic about 2 years ago now, playing with Kyle, and nothing brings me more joy or thrill than putting Kyle in the dirt when we play Magic. So, I'm here to kill Kyle.
And with Lathril, you can build it a few different ways. I feel like this is an unfair question for me, but do you normally just build up a big board and swing, or do you like to untap Lathril a lot to drain? Like, what's your normal win condition?
I feel like this Lathril deck wins in several different ways. Usually, I don't get to the point where I get to tap 10 permanents or 10 elves and deal 10 damage very much. So she really wins when I've got a lot of elves out that I can buff and just swing for a lot of damage.
This is my commander for today. You haven't seen it. I want to know what your thoughts are. What do you think?
Arcades Sabbath. She's pretty, hefty in the power here. And she's flying, which is not great against my elf deck because I really have no flyers and I don't really have anything to give them flying. So that's gonna suck.
I think the only thing left to do is to get right into the game.
Round one, fight.
So I'm on the play this game going first, and on my turn one, it's a pretty straightforward forest into wild growth, which is white border, by the way. Hate it, but I had to pick it up because it was the only version that they had. The only thing that really stands out about this turn one is that Allie does have a soul ring, which is going to definitely complicate some things for us moving forward, because that means her commander is going to come out literally the next turn. And that's a pretty big deal. If you've ever played against Lathril before, you know that the elf ball has to start somewhere, and Lathril tends to do a pretty good job of starting the elf ball off for you. So that soul ring is definitely going to come back in a big way for her, but otherwise the rest of the turn is pretty straightforward. So On to turn 2. My turn 2 is pretty bad. So I only have one play, which is the Wall of Runes. And that does smooth out my draw and give me a blocker. And I elected to go this route because the only other thing that I could have done is use one of my 3 mana cantripping spells, which basically just do some type of effect and then they allow me to draw a card, which would have been more mana efficient, but then I wouldn't have had a blocker. Now, it doesn't really matter to have a blocker for Lathril, but mind you, if she plays Lathril this turn on turn 2, she can't actually attack me and allow me an extra turn to set up another blocker, hopefully sort of deflecting away from me. That's sort of my thought process here. So I elected to go the slightly less mana efficient route and went with just the Wall of Runes, which will also hopefully smooth out my draws. And hopefully that'll also deflect away from me and toward Tim and Mark, so that way she can start wailing on them. Otherwise, the remainder of the turn is more setup for the players, and of course, Allie plays Lathril, which is terrifying, but let's move on to turn 3. If turn 3 had a name, it would be the Feels Bad turn, because I am only able to play a Llanowar Elves this turn unless I want to elect to use one of my 3 mana spells like previously mentioned, but I want another blocker in place just to sort of discourage Allie from swinging at me. I know her as a player. She doesn't like to swing into other people that have blockers, especially with people with mana up. So my hope is that by playing the Llanowar Elves this turn, it'll deter her from attacking me. I'm sort of using a little bit of meta, knowledge here that you wouldn't have as somebody coming into this group. But I think I can play her a little bit here by just playing the Llanowar Elves. And it really, really sucks because I only have 2 additional mana at this point, and I have to play a tap land. I don't have an option. I don't have any other lands in my hand. And not only that, I would have to develop this land eventually. So I'm stuck with 2 mana at this point. And it feels terrible because I have all these 3 mana cards in my hand that I want to play. I want to be able to cantrip them out. And it would also be nice because I also have the give a creature death touch, draw a card instant in my hand, to have 1 extra mana up for that if I had had another basic land, for instance, in my hand instead of the tap land. That way I could have at least really been a threat to Lathril, and I could have actually stopped Lathril and killed it in the process. That would have been great, but that's not what happened. So we're stuck, more or less, just on these lands here. Also, I just want to point out that Allie at this point is very scary, developing her elves. She's swinging with Lathril for value on her turn. But Mark is wide open. He's really taken the back seat in terms of developing his board. And Tim has also made it very clear that he's going to be developing some pieces to prevent Allie from attacking, which I point out to her to encourage her to attack the other players. So I feel pretty safe from the wrath of the elves in this circumstance, but we still have to contend with the fact that Mark is ramping out to an extreme degree. And Tim over there is going to be building up a pillow fort, which it doesn't matter too much for me, but once that's up, it's actually going to push Allie to attack either me or Mark. So that's going to come up in a big way at a later point in this game, but let's see what the next turn develops. So my turn 4 is all at sorcery speed. I effectively have to tap out in this circumstance, and I end up casting a Shielding Plaques on my Llanowar Elves, which this Shielding Plaques is going to be extremely important at a later stage in the game. So pay attention to this card. It comes in really big at a later stage in the game. And I also cast Farseek just to be mana efficient and also to fetch out a land. In the game, I think I say something to the effect of like, oh, I'm going to go get one of my dual lands, but silly me, I didn't pull a single fetchable tap land, such as like a Tangled Islet or something along those lines. So we are just sort of stuck with the fact that I have to just go get another basic. And I make a very big mistake here. So it's not immediately obvious just by watching the gameplay section of this play out, but I don't actually fetch out a Plains with the Farseek. And I'm doing this because I have a heavy, heavy concentration of blue and green spells in my deck. But I don't factor in that Arcades actually requires 2 white mana. So I should have fetched out a Plains here, and that's definitely going to come back to bite me. Really, Arcades is not integral to my overall strategy per se, but it would be nice to get Arcades out on curve roughly. So it really kind of hurts me here that I don't actually go and fetch out a Plains with the Farseek. This is also a big turn for reasons that you don't readily see at the table here, but Mark is really falling behind in terms of board development. And so I sort of make a tentative alliance with him because, again, we're pitching it that Tim is going to be setting up more of the pillow fort stuff and Allie is going to be on the aggression basically the entire game. So Mark and I developing some type of alliance is going to be integral for my survival, and also to hopefully develop more of a partnership throughout the rest of this game to sort of get me to the finish line. That's all I'm trying to do. I have to politic with this deck. It is such a low budget and poorly built deck for what I have available to me that I just have to actually go through these lines. I have to be more political. It's very dangerous because Mark has a lot of infinite combos in his deck. In fact, I would in general not make an alliance with Mark because it only requires 2 cards and he goes infinite in many different ways in his deck. So it's not really advantageous for me to make a partnership with him as compared to someone like Allie. I'm just in not any type of position to do so. So I have to partner with Mark here. And I think that that's actually going to be a big piece moving forward. I also just want to point out at the very end of Tim's turn, he plays an enchantment, which is called Island Sanctuary. And basically you can skip your draw step with this card, and then only creatures with flying and island walk can attack you for the rest of the turn cycle until your next turn. And this is actually half of an infinite combo. The other half that he has in his deck is Mystic Decree, and that basically it meets the other half. Essentially, you just can't attack him at all for the low cost of just skipping your draw phase, when otherwise he has plenty of other draw engines in his deck. So for our purposes, I make sure to point this out to Allie because in her eyes, this is going to be a very large threat. At least that's what I'm thinking. And I'm trying to, again, sort of politic here. I'm trying to drive her toward Tim in order to take the heat off of me, to give me more time to set up. Because, I mean, the table knows that I'm a little bit weaker, but, you know, when there's blood in the water, the sharks are going to come out. So, and Allie is definitely a shark at the table. She would not hesitate for a moment to prey on my weakness at the table. She's done it before, and I really, really need this to be deflected toward Tim. So I push very hard for her to attack Tim, because in the event that he develops that, we are going to need to seek out enchantment removal, which there's no guarantee that she has on hand, but I might be able to help out with that as well. So this becomes a big political piece for me. And then moving forward, this is a pretty big deal. It actually saves me a lot of health in the long run. That's turn 4. A lot's developed already. Let's move on to turn 5. There's not too much to say about this turn. I develop a Benevolent Bodyguard, and I also foretell a card. The foretell is more so for value at this point. You will see what that is in a little while. It actually comes up, I wouldn't say very big, but it definitely helps out the table a lot, and it really helps forward my game plan. And the value play here of foretelling actually, I don't know. Again, I'm just trying to be more mana efficient, and really that's all this is a mana efficiency play. I'm just trying to sort of, you know, cash in on my mana on future turns by, you know, investing now, so to speak. So that's why I'm foretelling this card. However, at the end of the turn, I do have a chance to draw something with one of my 3 mana, you know, give something Death Touch or whatever, draw spells. And so I actually draw into something very, very big. In fact, it's so big that I basically skip my entire next turn and I wait for the end of Tim's next turn in order to play it. And you'll see that here momentarily on turn 6. So like I mentioned, I basically take this turn off. As you're seeing on screen, we're just kind of going around the table. And this entire time, again, I'm just trying to politic and deflect away from me toward Tim or toward Mark, perhaps in this case, because Mark is starting to develop more of his combo pieces on board. But at the very end of Tim's turn, he plays a Smothering Tithe, and I drop a Hullbreaker Horror. And this is perhaps the best card that I can even think of to have in this deck. I'm only missing one thing, which is some type of enabler, some type of spell to start a loop, because you see the shielding plaques on my Llanowar Elves. All I need is one other piece, something else to cast, and then I can sort of cycle the shielding plaques to draw more cards, because I have like one card in hand at this point. I am effectively out of the game if the Hullbreaker Horror gets removed, and I'm just praying that I draw something here. So let's move on to my next turn as I untap here, and we'll see what I draw. So we're into turn 7, and I finally feel like I'm in a relatively decent position. I play Rampant Growth on my turn, and I end up bouncing the Shielding Plaques back to my hand because Hullbreaker Horror specifies on the stack it has to be an opponent's spell, but it can be any player's non-land permanent. So I bounce the plaques back to my hand, I replay it, And then I bounce Tim's Smothering Tithe, because bouncing the Tithe here I think has a lot of value, because that Tithe is the only thing that has the increased draw hate. And also, I would prefer him to be stuck, because he's been pretty well stuck on 3 or 4 lands for a majority of the game. And if I can really just push him further behind, I can hopefully play a longer game with him and eliminate the other players. That's sort of the idea that I have in my mind. And then I finally play my Foretell card, which is Raven form, exiling one of Allie's creatures. Ultimately, I bounce the plaques back to my hand, and I think for the first time this entire game, I finally have a grip. I am able to replay the plaques at this point and then draw another card, protecting my Hullbreaker Horror for yet another round at the table. And I think that I'm in a relatively really good position, especially because I still have mana up after this, which will hopefully allow me to maybe draw into a counter spell or leave up something else so I can bounce a spell back to somebody's hand. I don't have it in my hand yet, but I'm hoping on the draw that I'm going to get this. And then I get some absolutely terrible news.
1, 2, 3. Recast Shielding Plaques on Horror.
In that response, Fierce Guardianship. Shielding.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Unfortunately, you can see, I mentioned it earlier in the video, that I am going to be playing against some of my, friends' more powerful decks at this point. Especially when competing with this deck, and that Fierce Guardianship is just an absolute gut shot to me, because I unfortunately am just no longer afforded the draw here, and the Shielding Plaques officially gets countered. So I am just down for the count at this point, and I ultimately just have to pass. There's nothing else for me to do here. So we get around to turn 8, and I bring out my commander. That's really all that I do on my turn. There's not too much for me to do. But importantly, on Mark's turn, he decides to play Rooftop Storm. And this is a notorious combo piece for zombies. He mentioned in his interview he's playing combo. This is his combo enabler. And so if this sticks on the board, pretty much we die here. There's nothing else for us to do. We lose the game more or less on the spot. And I think that Mark made maybe a tactical error here in countering the Shielding Plaques with his Fierce Guardianship. He was worried that I was going to just keep, bouncing things maybe to even his hand, which ultimately, I did sort of punish him. But in this case, he should have kept the Fierce Guardianship for protection of his Rooftop Storm, because likely he would have just won at this moment. But this means that I get to cast my Decisive Denial, and Mark's unable to pay the 3, meaning that I get to counter the Rooftop Storm and get an additional bounce with my Hullbreaker Horror, which is pretty darn good. However, I do want to acknowledge that I definitely made a mistake in this circumstance. Tim is playing in blue, and he's playing some pretty powerful counter magic in his deck, I know, just because that's, the type of player he is. So I should have just let priority pass, and I should have said, okay, Allie, do you have a response? Okay, Tim, do you have a response? And I should have just acted it out like maybe I don't have anything, which could have baited a spell from Tim's hand, so that way I wouldn't have had to expended one of my own. Ultimately, I still got the value on, my Hullbreaker Horror, but that's what I should have done. I shouldn't have been so hasty to just go ahead and counter the spell. I really wanted the trigger on the Hullbreaker Horror, and I think it was just a mistake. I should have just let, the priority pass to Tim and see if he had anything to actually destroy the Rooftop Storm. That would have been a better play, I think. And then as we continue to move through the turn cycle, Tim actually plays out an Elish Norn, and this card is just so good for me. I have big creatures on my side of the board. I also still get to keep my Wall of Runes around despite the negative reduction. So I have blockers for days compared to the rest of the table, which they're all just tiny little creatures at this point. And I also have a big flyer in Arcades, which is actually the first time this commander is really relevant in this circumstance. I love that this Elish Norn sticks on the battlefield, and I would much prefer that this stay around. So I sort of want to play a little bit of defense here and keep Tim around now. I'm going to sort of use him as sort of like a pawn in my game to try and win the overall chess game, so to speak. And unfortunately, Allie does drain the table here in response to Elish Norn on the stack, which is, very smart of her for doing that, but that brings us down quite low. And Lathril ultimately is not dead because she is a 3 toughness commander, so we still have to contend with the fact that Lathril is still out, and there's likely some more shenanigans to come from that. But let's go ahead and take my next turn, which is turn 9. So this is the first time that we get to see just how bad Arcades really is. Paying 3 mana, in particular 3 colored mana, that you have to have in each different, denomination, so the blue, the green, and the white, is just awful. Like, this is just such a terrible upkeep cost. I have to pay 11 mana in one turn cycle just to get a 7/7 that gives my stuff a toughness buff. I mean, there's a reason that this commander is at one of the, bottommost leaderboards in terms of, built commanders on EDH Rec. It's just awful. But also on my upkeep, I decide to actually play another spell in the form of Growth Spiral, and that's mostly to bounce the Smothering Tithe again. I don't want Tim to get more and more treasures. That gives him a wider variety of things he's able to accomplish, and he still has some other cards in his hand that he hasn't shown us yet. So I'm sort of worried that if I give him too much rope with the Smothering Tithe, he's going to be able to play something big out again, like the Elish Norn. So I think this is probably the best bounce, and then that way I can draw my card for turn and the card with Growth Spiral. Unfortunately, as part of the resolution of Growth Spiral, I don't have a land in my hand, so I can't play it out. That kind of sucks, but it is what it is. And then I go to combat on my turn. I kill Tim's Planeswalker. That's mostly because this is not only sort of like a Pillow Fort stacks piece, but also because it can exile my things, and I hate that. So I decide to swing in with Arcades and destroy it here instead of attacking Allie, which I would have preferred to do. Now, with that being said, this is sort of an error. Tim did have a flyer on board. I think we're just in the moment caught up, and everybody's like, "Oh, Tim's so salty. We're gonna kill his Planeswalker, and he's been put in the dirt this whole game." And I think that we just kind of got ahead of ourselves. Tim really did have a blocker, and there's a very high likelihood he would have blocked in this circumstance with his flyer. And I think that Mark probably would have still got through and killed it, if I had attacked with two of my creatures, but that was just an error on our behalf. I just got ahead of myself. Tim got ahead of himself. So with that being said, this might have changed the game somewhat, but not substantially. For the rest of the turn cycle, most of us are just rebuilding after that Elish Norn turn, and I'm really starting to feel okay. I mean, the Shielding Plaques being countered earlier was a big blow to me, but I'm actually starting to feel okay in this game. I'm starting to feel like maybe I have a chance moving forward, because this game is clearly drawing out for a longer game. And that's what I've wanted since the beginning. That's how I built my deck. So I have these big spells, and I'm hoping to draw into one as the turns pass. And boy, do I get rewarded on turn 10, top decking a 5-mana enchantment, which I play out pretty much right away, which is Glorious Sunrise. Now, this is a really weird enchantment that I've never seen before. And by weird, I mean it's just kind of meh for the what you get. It should probably be a little bit cheaper, honestly, for the effect that you get, because it's contingent on you having like creatures out and all that type of stuff. But in our case, it's great in this circumstance because I get continuous card draw off of this during each of my combats, which I am desperately needing here, especially after my previous turn with the plaques getting countered. And at this point, I can finally start leaving up some of my walls, so to speak. I can hopefully just through attrition sort of win this game. That's what I'm sort of hoping at this point. And then as evidenced here, as I pass the turn, Tim's Elish Norn is just saving me again. It saved me by getting rid of all of Allie's creatures. And now Mark over here casts Go for the Throat, which probably should have been targeted toward my Hullbreaker Horror. But the key here is that Mark cannot play the game, and he has no infinite combo potential with Elish Norn on the battlefield. There's no way for him to even play the game. So Elish Norn was such a magnet for me. It just totally took the pressure off of my Hullbreaker Horror and Arcades. And in that case, I'm able to actually squeak by yet another turn with my board relatively untouched. And I guarantee that my board would have been ripped apart by Mark in this circumstance, and my Hullbreaker Horror would be dead if it was not for Tim's Elish Norn. So thanks for playing that, Tim. I really appreciate it. Moving on to turn 11. So I had a heavy amount of deliberation on this turn because I have a little card in my hand called Volition Reigns. And so this card basically is a 6-mana enchantment to control any permanent that I so desire on the board. And I had a lot of choices laid out in front of me. Now, here's my thought process. I ultimately cast the Volition Reigns on the Smothering Tithe, and I do this for a few reasons. One, Tim, again, is down on mana, and he makes it a point to sort of yell at me for taking it. He's like, oh, I haven't had any, I've missed my land drops, and I haven't had any mana. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's why I'm taking it from you, for one reason. For another, I have to pay this upkeep cost of Arcades, which is just sort of putting me further behind. And I have Glorious Sunrise and the Hullbreaker Horror on the battlefield, so I'm hoping for a long game. My idea here is I'm going to keep Tim around, as mentioned before, and sort of use him as a pawn in my game and deflect, attacks toward him, hopefully. And then I can profit off of the Smothering Tithe. I also use this as a moment because Mark has a card out on his side of the board that lets him discard his hand at his upkeep and draw that many, and then draw for turn. And I say, look, if I don't take your stuff or bounce it with the Hullbreaker Horror, just give me the treasure, because that's all I want. Because I have a specific card in my hand that I am meaning to play on Allie's turn, which will hopefully just totally cinch the game for me. And I am just losing my mind. I'm just praying that I get this through, because if Mark gives me the treasure and I get the Smothering Tithe, I am in such a good position. And that is exactly what happens. And we are in it. We are absolutely in this game. And I am so excited. For the first time, I'm thinking, not only am I in a good position, but I can actually win this thing. So maximizing my mana for the rest of the turn, I just play out my Llanowar Visionary, I draw a card, all that good stuff, and I pass. Mark takes his turn. He gives me the treasure as requested. And then on Allie's upkeep, I cast just a sleeper of a spell that I actually haven't even seen before, just probably because it's older, hasn't been reprinted a lot, and that is Ceasefire. Now, if you've never heard of this card before, because I sure haven't, basically it just shuts off her ability to play any creatures until the end of turn. And of course, we're playing on her upkeep. We're being smart about this. This essentially means that on her main phase, she has nothing to do most of the time because we're an elf ball. And I'm thinking this is just a genius play. I get to just remove her ability to play creatures. Hopefully it gives me a full turn cycle to continuously bounce her and Mark stuff at this point. And then what that allows me to do is keep Tim around long enough to remove the other two players, and we got this. So the Ceasefire resolves, and I bounce the Crawl Space on Tim's board because Allie has enough creatures to chip him down, but not enough to kill him. And I sort of say, like, look, I'll remove this. You attack Tim. Kumbaya, all's good. And that will allow me to hopefully swing in and kill Tim on my turn if needed. I sort of have the pressure on him, so to speak, and I have more bargaining power as a result. And then that also allows Allie a free swing into Tim on her turn. So I think that I'm trying to politic this in a specific way to get to the victory. I have a very narrow line here, and I'm trying to just ride it as much as I can. But there is a really big problem here. A really big problem. The Ceasefire does not matter at all. Yeah. I basically get hosed here because Allie plays a little sorcery called Patriarch's Bidding. And wouldn't it have been nice to hold up the Ceasefire in response to the Patriarch's Bidding, and I bounce it back to her hand? That would have been great, but that's not what happened. So, unfortunately, I'm out of mana. I have nothing else to do because I was praying that my silence effect on her was going to stick, and she didn't have anything else. But she has a Patriarch's Bidding, bringing back a ton of creatures to her board, totally repopulating it. And I am only able to bring back a single little Llanowar Elves, which, it's something, but not when compared to her 6 creatures she brings back. And she's able to drain the table, and she has Lathril on the board. There's just so much going wrong at this point. If she had any type of haste enabling or any type of anthem effect, most of us were dead. At least 1 or 2 of us were dead this turn. It's just a blowout on this end here. So unfortunately, because I set Tim even further behind, Allie is now way ahead of the game. And I think that Mark is just not in a position to really control things. I am stuck top decking. So Tim's turn is basically moot, and we move on to my turn 12. And I have one hope in order to get through and win this game. It's in my top deck, and it's within my commander, actually. So let's go on to my turn 12. So let's analyze the board position here a little bit. So Allie is only 2 commander hits away from dying from Arcades. And actually, that was one of the first things I thought of in the intro to this video, is maybe I just attack with Arcades 3 times. And I think that that's going to be my path to victory, because Allie really only has one way to get her creatures flying, which is the Eldrazi Monument that's in her deck. I know it's in there because I built the deck a long time ago, and I don't believe we've taken it out unless she has without me knowing. And I'm praying that what I can do here is attack with Arcades on my turn, get her to 14 commander damage, survive one last turn, and then just swing out with Arcades and finish her off with commander damage on my turn 13. That's the hope. In addition to this, Tim is effectively drawing dead at this point, and I really also want to keep his Smothering Tithe for one more turn cycle. So there's really no benefit to me swinging out at him in any capacity, which would basically allow Mark to finish him off before it gets to Allie's turn, where I get another, Smothering Tithe trigger from her drawing. So I really just want to keep Tim around because I don't think he's a threat anymore. He's basically out of the game entirely. And so I just want to keep it that way. So we're not going to swing at Tim. And for Mark, I just have to pray that his zombies don't combo off. He has multiple pieces on his board at this point, which can combo. And I remember looking over at him and I said, like, hey, do you have any way to end this game right now? And he says, no, I actually don't have anything in my hand. But he still has his discard, draw engine sort of on board. And so I'm thinking, at this point, I just have to pray that Mark doesn't get anything. And I have to hope that Allie is unable to kill me, despite the fact I have to swing out with Arcades. So I play Night Soil on my turn, which is an enchantment. It's kind of an interesting graveyard hate piece. It shuts off one of Mark's strategies, and I think, okay, well, if Mark is able to get the Gravecrawler out and sacrifice it, I'm at least able to get rid of that from his graveyard, sort of shutting off Mark's, combo potential. And also, that gives me another blocker for, Allie's turn where she's likely going to be swinging at me. So I'm trying to think here, maybe I can find one of these narrow lines to victory. I actually use this opportunity to bounce Allie's Lightning Greaves attached to Lathril. And then on my turn, I cast Eureka Moment to bounce Lathril to her hand. And I think maybe there's a way that I can live now, because she's going to require a 6 mana setup to get Lathril back out. Even if she's able to untap in this circumstance with Lathril and swing out, I think I'll be okay. So I just have to pray I have enough blockers to get through. So I swing out with Arcades, I deal 7 damage to her, and then I just cross my fingers. But there was one thing that I wasn't taking into account. What was that one thing? It's a little card that, untaps Allie's Elves. And I didn't return it to her hand. I didn't have enough mana to return it, and I should have pointed it out to the board before her taking her turn, so that way maybe Mark could have done something about it. And unfortunately, on Allie's turn, after all of this buildup and riding the line so heavily, she is able to tap Lathril twice, draining the table for 20, securing the victory for her, and meaning that I have to go to a game 2 and spin the wheel, possibly incurring something very, bad in terms of like cost reduction for my deck. And I'm just at a loss, because if Allie did not have that win on that turn, I actually think I had it. I actually think I would have won, but we didn't. So we're going to go to game number 2, and I'll see you in the gameplay section, so that way you can watch me spin the wheel. So let's go do that now. All right, so I lost miserably. So we're going to spin the wheel and see what happens to me. This is the wheel. All right, I get to add $50 of cards to my deck, so let's do that. Oh, man. All I can say is thank God that I didn't roll a price deduction, and I actually got a little bit to put into the deck. On screen now are the includes that I put in. Let's just get into the next game. I'm ready. I'm ready to win. Let's do this.
Round 2, fight!
All right, so we're just going to come out hot just to get you up to speed with this game, and let's just get right in. So turn 1, I just play a land and pass. Allie is able to get out fast with an exploration, playing 2 lands, Mark Mystical Tutors, and then Tim plays an Esper Sentinel. You can see where the power of the table lies, and it's not on my board. Turn 2, I'm ramping with what I think is actually an incredible card in this circumstance. It's Elysian Katydid. I always forget how to pronounce this one. And it's super good. You'll see why on the next turn, turn 3. Specifically, this card tends to be an overperformer in this specific deck list. Allie gets out Lathril on turn 2, which is terrifying. She does it again because she has a Soul Ring again really early on, so that feels bad for me. And Tim has drawn 2 cards off of the Esper Sentinel. So at least for myself, it's an incredibly bad start because we know that Mark has tutored out a Vampiric Tutor with his Mystical Tutor. Tim has his card draw set up on board. Allie has her commander out already. It just doesn't look like a good game. I'm going to have to really rely on my enemies to sort of suppress themselves moving forward for me to get any type of advantage. And on turn 3, you can sort of see why I'm excited to have the specific ramp option that I did, because I get to play a Topiary Stomper, meaning that my Elysian Katydid, however you pronounce it, actually taps for 2 mana now and not just 1. It's very good. It's basically double the ramp in this circumstance. And then we play around the board quickly. I'm going to just kind of skip over this because it's a lot of setup turns and little chip damage. It's not really exciting or informational for you guys. So let's just move right on to turn 4. Now we're on turn 4, and I did have a chance to edit my deck in between and add some money, some stuff for my own collection, and we're sort of seeing on full display why cards like Command Tower are just so good. Like, it gives you so much more flexibility. If we look back at my previous game, I was unable to even cast my commander until multiple turns after the fact, like when I should have been able to, simply because I was just getting mana screwed and I didn't have enough white sources. Partially my own fault. I could have, tutored out those pieces with Farseek, for instance, in the last game. But here, I already have everything on like turn 3 or 4. It's crazy to me that like this level of flexibility exists in very budget pods. And it gives me a new appreciation for these cards that I otherwise sort of just take for granted now because I've always been playing with them. These are actually extremely good cards to be playing with. And simple changes just in the mana base have gone a long way in terms of improving my performance in this game already. Importantly, I just want to point out something on this turn that was actually useful for us. We actually see Mark cast Dark Ritual, and then he says something to the effect of like, oh, no, never mind. And he takes it back. That makes me think that maybe he's setting up for something. And my little, bells and whistles are ringing at this point. So I am on high alert for this next turn when I can actually leave mana up to maybe counter something, because I do have a counter spell in my hand. And it makes me very suspicious because he would have had exactly around 6 mana. I would suspect that in that circumstance, he's looking at maybe casting Rooftop Storm. And remember, he did tutor, so it could have been for something like the Rooftop Storm. So we'll just have to wait and find out. But at the very end of Tim's turn, all I do is cycle away a land, draw a card, and then we move on to turn 5. So on turn 5, I cultivate and then basically pass the turn. Again, I'm leaving up mana for a specific reason. Let's see if it actually pays off. Very quickly into Mark's turn, he does Dark Ritual again. And he has Will Helt out at this time, which has me even more concerned. And sure enough, there it is. It's Rooftop Storm. It's exactly what I was expecting. So I am prepared for this situation, and I cast Plasm Capture, which is essentially just a worse mana drain. And I mentioned this earlier in the video that this might come up, and it does. So I go ahead and counter that spell. He doesn't have any response for that. And I get to add 6 mana in any combination of colors at my next upkeep or next main phase 1. It's actually pretty good for a budgetary card, but leaving up 4 mana is not always reliable. I guess it's because it's in Simic, it makes it a little bit better, but I probably would still not run this card. It just happened to work out really well in this circumstance. Also, Allie just kind of quietly sneaks a Priest of Titania onto the board. I didn't really see this before until I was actually editing the video, but she just didn't say anything. She just tapped her mana and put it out there, just hoping, I think, that nobody was going to actually, recognize it or see it. So let's see if that actually has anything or any complications in the game moving forward. So let's talk about turn 6. So this is an absolutely brutal turn for me. Just terrible, actually. This is, I would say, the beginning of the end for me. So I have 3 cards in hand. I have 2 lands, which are just basics, and I've already played my land for turn. And then I have a Hydroid Krasis. And if you know what a Hydroid Krasis is, you get to pump it. And not only do you get a big creature, you also get to draw half of whatever the value of X you assign is. And I have this fat pool of mana sitting there. I have 6 of it. And I thought to myself, I could sort of split this up. I could do Arcades and the Hydroid Krasis, or I could just try my damnedest to get this to stick. And then, from there, I should be able to maybe draw into something. And I felt like that was a better option because Mark is still tutored. And I don't know if he's tutored for another combo piece in his deck because, again, he has multiple different combos. Or maybe there is, something else under the surface that Tim has because he's drawn so many cards. And of course, Allie has accelerated out her board state as well. So I think that just drawing more cards and hopefully getting more counter spells into my hand is going to be the way to go to actually win this game. I think this is not a win more play. This is just the optimal play to make in this setting because I'll get to draw 7 cards off of this X value, which is incredible. It's a full refresh on my hand. I think that it was the best play to make, and unfortunately, it did not pay off. So I'm beating around the bush, but Tim mana drains this 17 CMC spell on the stack, and I am just like heartbroken about this for a few reasons. I had nothing else in my hand. I was drawing dead at this point. And I was also upset because we have seen Mark tutor for multiple different pieces. You would think that would register and you would want to hold something up for that. And I understand why he wants to counter the 17 CMC thing with mana drain. That just makes sense, right? Like it's a juicy target. I'm not, throwing shade at him for countering the big thing. What I'm saying is he had better have something else to back up when Mark ultimately goes off. Is that foreshadowing? I think that's foreshadowing. Hi, Tim. How you doing? Needless to say, Tim quickly solidifies himself as the enemy here, and I pass because I have nothing else. I have 2 cards in hand. They are lands. I basically am out of this game altogether. And Mark takes his turn, sets some more things up. But Allie has the really big turn here. She goes ahead and she just brutalizes Tim this turn. She uses her Allosaurus Shepherd, turns everything into 5/5s, all of which also have buffs on them. And she does just a ton of damage to Tim. He's unable to block most of it. He could have thrown his Esper Sentinel and his other creature in front, but he really chose to just sort of maximize his current board state, and he went all the way down to, I think, 9, which is just crazy because he was basically at starting life total prior to this. And that makes total sense. He's going to have, I think it was like 23 mana, and I pointed this out to Allie. I'm like, look, either Tim's going to win or Mark's going to win, but I would place the bet on the guy who just has an upcoming 17 mana during his main phase. We probably should knock the life gain deck down who's going to have over 20 mana on their main phase, to which she said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So that's why Tim got the shaft there from Allie. The only other thing that I want to comment on is I probably should have in that moment when Tim threw out the mana drain. Now, to be fair, he didn't say like, I have a counter, let's talk, right? He just said, threw it on the table, didn't say anything to me. I probably should have still stood up for myself and said, hey, wait. Do you have anything else in your hand to counter Mark's stuff, to counter Allie's stuff? Because if you don't, it's probably advantageous to let me draw here. I should have tried to politic my way out. I tried to politic so hard in the last game, but we also had timing restrictions on us. It just wasn't really on my mind. But looking back, that's what I should have done. I should have said that we need to prioritize these other problem players, you and I, and how about we partner up this game? That's what I should have done. And I don't think it would have worked, to be honest. Like, I asked him like after the game and he said yes, but I don't know if I believe that. It's a 17 CMC spell on the stack. That's too juicy to pass up. And I will say it's a little frustrating for me because he actually wasted, I think, like 7 or 8 of the mana. But, it is what it is. I'm just salty, okay? I'm salty. He countered my spell. He took me completely out of the game. What do you want me to do? So now we're on to turn 7 and I immediately pass. I have nothing to do except for something at flash speed, which again, that I can just do on Tim's end step. So I immediately pass. And in our circumstance here, the only other important play that I want to point out is that Mark plays Professor Onyx. And Professor Onyx is a key combo piece, especially with a card called Chain of Smog. And I actually had forgotten about this, but it doesn't really change anything because I can't do anything about Professor Onyx. And unfortunately, Tim has already shut down the board with his other pieces. So there's really not a lot of ways to get in and attack Professor Onyx at this time. It's sort of like the perfect storm because I am completely shut down. I have nothing to attack Professor Onyx with. Otherwise I would. In addition to that, Allie is still focusing her hate toward Tim because Tim is now shutting her down. And then Tim is just trying to stay alive, and he's receiving my hate and Allie's hate. So Mark has just sort of managed to slide right under the radar, play Professor Onyx, and as you watch this turn play out, you see nobody even attack it. It's never even brought up in conversation. I think I just made some comment about it. I was like, what does the +1 do again? And that was it. And I was the only one that even asked about the thing on the board. And I think that's just Commander. You know, sometimes you just forget because there's so many cards to choose from in this game. It's very difficult to keep track of all of the different infinite combos. But either way, priority passes around. I play my Hullbreaker Horror at end step, which again doesn't matter because I have nothing in hand. I have 2 lands in hand still. So I'm just sort of stuck playing a big body on the board. And I just have to sort of hope that Mark just doesn't have it. And I take my turn. I just play my Commander Arcades because I have nothing else to do. And I probably should have bounced the Professor Onyx at this point. I don't think it really mattered. I think Mark would have had enough mana either way because as we see, Mark plays the Chain of Smog and the game ends. He infinite combos out because of the static ability on Professor Onyx, coupled with the ability of Chain of Smog. You infinitely target yourself and you just drain the whole table out. Everyone dies. And that worked out for timing restrictions, but looking back, especially in that moment, again, Tim had 3 open mana at that time, and he had a full grip. I think he had 7 cards in hand, I want to say, still, because he was drawing so many. He should have had some type of counterspell for that, because my Hydra, again, is not going to end the game, but the guy who's tutoring out all of the pieces, I'm still aghast that he did that. But I think, again, I'm just being salty, so I just got to get over it. And you know, looking back at the game, I think that Tim still made the right choice because, yes, if you look at the very end, he did have 3 mana available to him, but you have to take into consideration the fact that mana drain he did on me was able to propel his board state. It's just, I think it was a bit premature, but I don't think there was going to be anything bigger in the game for him to counter anyway, so he was sort of maximally taking advantage of it. The frustrating part is at the very end of the game when he has 3 open mana, 2 of which is blue, he has no counter spells in hand to stop, you know, his infinite combo, Mark's infinite combo. And that's very frustrating. You would hope that the person who has not only accelerated out their board state, has all their draw engines online, and also has a full 7 playing control would have a counter spell, but it just didn't work out. And sometimes that happens. I mean, it is what it is. It's just, it was extra frustrating for me in that moment because I was salty about my thing being countered. So I don't know, maybe this would have turned out differently if I had politicked with him. Actually, I would love to know what you would have done in that circumstance. Would you have tried to politic more to try to get this person to not counter your thing based on those game circumstances? Or would you not have even thought about it? I don't know. It's really difficult to say. Again, Commander is such a wide game. It's very difficult for me to sort of piece together what I would have done in these circumstances because there's so many variables going on. And I don't even know, because I didn't look at the top 7 of my deck. I could have just whiffed on counter spells as well, and it could have been strictly advantageous for me. So it's really, really hard to say for sure. I do think probably the better play for the whole table would have been to allow me to draw those cards because it would have kept the others in check. But, you know, 6-1, half dozen of the other, hard to say. What would you have done? All right. It's hard to believe, but just like that, we're at game 3, and I was able to make some changes to my deck, and those are going to be shown on screen now. I went for some bigger hitting spells just because I felt like, A, I didn't want to waste everybody's time nitpicking through a deck, but also, B, pulling a Rhystic Study in the early game is effectively winning the game anyway, right? I mean, it's a really good spell, so I just wanted to include that, hence why that got included in the $50 budget. I got very lucky. I very easily could have just had no benefits whatsoever, and I would have been forced to just run my base deck, which would have honestly really sucked. So I'm really happy it made this challenging a bit more interesting. So let's dive into the third game and see if I'm able to pull it out. And now, an ad from our sponsor. It's me. Actually, it really is me. I am the sponsor of today's episode. I am the only person that's financially invested in this channel in any way. I've never had a sponsor, and I don't plan on taking any if I can help it. I'm hoping that it can be fully self-sufficient just through you, the patrons, and also through the merch, which is coming out very soon. So if you go over to my Patreon, you'll get to see the tokens. There's 3 of them that are actually coming out very soon. And I've swapped over from Patreon from Coffee just because more people are familiar with Patreon. And I had people basically saying they'd be comfortable subscribing on Patreon, but not the Coffee. So there you go. You get a Patreon. And if you want one of these tokens, or actually you'll get one of each of these tokens signed by me, then you have to subscribe to the Patreon. I'm currently in discussion with the warehouse and manufacturer right now to get pilots of these tokens completed in limited runs. So if you want to be a part of that initial limited run, they're going to be available for only a short amount of time. So you'll have to subscribe over on my Patreon. Just leave your address and I will ship them. No additional charge to you. It's just one of the perks of signing on for the Patreon. And then you'll get additional tokens as they're produced every couple of months. I have plans on doing multiple different artist limited series through the Patreon and then also releasing them on the market after. But if you want the first crack at them and you want the more limited signed editions from me, then you have to go over to the Patreon now and subscribe.
Final round.
Same thing as last time. We're just going to kind of fly through the early turns. On turn 1, it's mostly just ramping between Allie and both myself with mana dorks on the table. And on turn 2, some interesting developments start to happen, mainly with Mark getting a demonic tutor out more or less right away, which is pretty scary because remember what happened last time when he got a demonic tutor off. So I'm not happy to see this, but unfortunately there's nothing I can do about it. I have no counter magic in my hand at the moment. And the only other person to develop anything at this point is Allie, who plays an Elvish War Master. On turn 3, as Mark is going first this time around, he casts Fabricate, which scares me even more than it probably should, but it really terrifies me in this circumstance because that Fabricate goes and gets a Phyrexian Altar. And you can guarantee that he didn't tutor for the tutor. So he has 2 pieces in his hand to the puzzle. He likely is maybe 1 card away or just a couple turns away from going infinite, which really terrifies me. So I think in our circumstance now, with the way the game is set up, we all have to collectively target Mark or hold up counter magic if we have it. On the same turn, Allie does play Lathril, but this is the slowest so far, turn 3. Turns out Lathril on turn 3 is not as good as Lathril on turn 2. And then I cast Deliberate on Tim's end step just to sort of set myself up, and then I bring it back to my hand with E-Witness on my turn. I am last in turn order this time around, which is why I'm able to do this. I also want to point out, I find it really suspicious as turn 4 begins that Tim has not really used any of his mana whatsoever. I'm not sure if he's just trying to atone for his sins, or maybe he has something else planned, like a counter spell or counter magic, but it's awfully suspicious he's leaving up so much mana turn after turn. This turn, Mark casts Wilhelt. Allie does the Elf Ball shenanigans that normally Lathril is a part of. And then I cast Manglehorn on Allie's Lightning Greaves, which she is equipped to Lathril. Because there's no other artifact targets, I definitely would have went after Mark's Phyrexian Altar if it was out. But really, I just need to develop something, and being able to target Lathril, I think, is worthwhile. So that is turn 4 in a nutshell, very quick. And what did I say? Everything crumbles. Everything goes downhill on turn 5. Mark sticks his infinite combo. And I cannot believe that Tim or myself don't have some type of counter magic for this combo. It's non-creature spell and a creature spell. We should have something collectively between the two of us. We have at least like 12 cards in hand. I'm genuinely surprised that Mark was able to just stick this infinite combo. And the combo, by the way, is the Phyrexian Altar with Gravecrawler, infinitely sacrificing it to then bring it back, which Wilhelt sees, making infinite 2/2 decayed zombies. I think Mark specified he had like 10 billion or 100 billion or something like that. So that's the actual number that he decided to go with. At this point, there's really nothing else for us to do aside from just stop Mark. So Allie, unfortunately, doesn't have anything to respond on the stack. But on her turn, she does cast a Reclamation Sage to get rid of the Phyrexian Altar. And luckily, Mark tries to counter this with a delay, but she has an Allosaurus Shepherd out, which makes all of her green spells uncounterable. Who knew that card did that? Unfortunately, I think it's all a little bit too little, too late as we get over to Tim's turn, and nothing significant develops there either, with more mana just being held up. I'm awfully suspicious of what he's doing. I am hoping at this point that Tim has something to interact with Mark. Otherwise, we are dead. All of us are dead. But what I think my thought in the moment is what's much more likely is that he has something to save himself and get himself out of the situation, which would make total sense. He's not atoning for his sins. Oh no, he is making more sins. So the start of turn 6 comes, and my last day on this earth has come. Mark starts off and he swings 1,000,000 zombies at me, 1,000,000 zombies at Allie, and 1,000,000 zombies at Tim. And, you know, Tim, he tries to be cute. He plays a selfless squire and blocks a lot of the damage, but collectively this basically does nothing because Mark still has billions of zombies in reserve. And there is no counter magic at this point that is going to realistically save Tim. The only thing is going to be some type of board wipe. So the action goes back to Tim, and guess what? No board wipe. Mark did it again. He has the biggest glut of zombies to ever exist, and he just goes all out on us and overwhelms us with his zombie army. I'd like to say that I'm upset, but I really love these people that I play with, and I'm so happy to see Mark's new upgraded Wilhelt deck actually win, and not only win just one time, but twice. And, you know, by proxy, I did build the Lathril deck, but it's very cool to see Allie reach wins in different ways as she has evolved as a Magic player over the past few years. I'm very, very delighted to see the fact that she is piloting this deck in a very sophisticated way and taking advantage of the synergies that she previously missed. It's very cool to see her develop as a player. And Tim, if you're listening to this, And that's it. This was a very long video. Collectively, it took me upwards of 20 hours to edit this, and there was errors along the way, like the audio, for instance, not being collectively saved for all of the gameplay footage that we obtained. There's going to be things to iron out, places to save on time, you know, little things to add to here and there in order to make this a better viewing experience for you. And the best possible way for you to help do that is, well, if you liked it, of course, share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel. But if you want to financially make this a possibility to do more of these in-depth analyses and, you know, random gameplay videos like this that nobody else is doing, then I would recommend subscribing on my new Patreon. I ended up switching over from the Patreon to coffee, as mentioned in the mid-roll ad, because I just don't think people really know what a coffee is. And so I decided to just push it over to Patreon. If you're interested over there, I have tons of different tiers. And more importantly, I have very cool tokens that are being released. And again, I am currently in the works with a manufacturing company to make a pilot of the tokens that you see on screen now. And then you will be the first to get them. If you subscribe to the Patreon, you will get all of these tokens delivered to you for no extra charge. If you decide to cancel after the first month, totally fine. If you just wanted to get the tokens and run, I'm fine with it. But I really hope that you like this video. If there's anything else that you want to see improved, please comment down below. If you think that things were a little bit overdone or underdone, I want to know about it so I can make the changes in future episodes of this series. And there will be more in this series, as I've already picked out my next commander, and I am currently planning that video as we speak. So please be sure to comment, stick around, and watch my future videos for those. And of course, watch for my new future uploads coming out that aren't strictly the gameplay series. I've been Kyle. Thank you so much for watching this extended video. Support my addiction so I can support your addiction. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.